Thank you, Parag. I'm glad you brought forward that issue on the design of auctions, which uh, I think currently the way they are designed seems to be aimed at tremendous inflation at every round. So, and I think that that's really counterproductive. Of course, the other issue with auctions, which is far more simple than the design itself, is what the government does with the money, right? Because if the money is coming from telecom, I think there are hundreds of ways in which it can be flowed back into telecom and used for far more productive use, and then simply being used to fund the deficit. But that's okay. I'm going to ask Jam Yang, who's been patiently listening to everyone speak about regulatory aspects in India, and it'd be interesting if you can tell us how things are in Bhutan, where you are. I'm sure it's a market about which very few people here know much in terms of mobile internet, use of mobile internet, e-governance initiatives, quality of regulations. So if you can briefly give us an overview, I think it would be helpful. And if you want to comment on our own regulations, we are tolerant people, we'd like to listen to some criticism.
No, I think the panel has comprehensively commented on the India side of your regulatory and policy issues. But can anyone hear me? Okay. I think for most of you, and I'm sort of an outlier here because I come from a country which is probably quite hard for most of you to relate to because we're a population of just around 700,000 people altogether, and so also when it comes to telecommunications, we entered this arena quite late. The first mobile towers were set up in 2003, 2004, and that was just a state monopoly that ran this. And then only in 2008, a second operator came into the market. And so in a lot of ways, we were able to avoid the excesses of the 2000, 2001 tech booms and then the subsequent collapse of internet companies and telecommunications companies. But having been late on the scene also meant that it's been a lot of catching up to do. And when when Sukumar and the panel were discussing issues of revenue versus reach in telecommunications policy, and also Gaurav's comments on your efforts at MyGov, these all really resonated with me, and I can see that in Bhutan we're really still in very early stages of trying to reap the benefits of telecommunications and sort of now with mobile technology. But even with a couple of decades of other country experiences to look at, we continue to sort of see the same problems in trying to work out the policy mandates versus business sort of objectives. And I think this continues to happen even in a place like ours. And one thing that also came to mind here listening to the panel was that for Bhutan as well, and into the early parts of the new millennium, and internet connectivity and penetration was just abysmal. We were looking at basically under 3% of broadband penetration around the country, and it was only after the mobile services came in that that number just went up and significantly. So now in Bhutan we're looking at around 35% internet connectivity thanks to mobile internet now. So I think this has really changed the lives of people, and in so many ways. And even before smartphones and apps became a mainstay in people's lives, and being able to communicate meant huge changes in people's lives. But now we're seeing that the access that people have to government services, being able to conduct banking or just financial transactions more efficiently, has really I think taken up the well-being of people all around the country. And I think as to the policy issues, I think we continue to I think iron out the details, but we've been having successes as well as failures.
Okay, thank you. I think the first round took a little longer than I expected, but that's all right. I want to move to, again, we're still staying on the regulatory aspect, but two very sticky issues, which is really privacy and net neutrality, and very polarized views on both. Well, there's been a lot of noise about net neutrality, and I think it's an important issue. You haven't had the same amount of noise about privacy, but then if that becomes a hot button issue, and that I think it will at some point in time, it could actually threaten the use of Aadhaar itself, which forms the bulwark of many of the government's initiatives. So it'll be interesting to get your perspective on that, what you think needs to be done, where we need to go from here. I'm obviously going to start with NK again, because sitting where he is, I think he's got a very clear idea of what needs to be done, and two, he probably knows what is being done, right? So.
Well, thank you. First of all, let me say that I fully endorse the broad observation that considering the legacy which the Modi government inherited on telecom, which was a combination of financial malfeasance, scandals, and the interventions of the courts, I fully agree that what the government has really adopted in terms of the auction is the only transparent way forward. Of course, on the designing of the auction, it's always a learning curve on the designing of the auction. There are no fixed paradigms in an area where technology is changing so fast, and it's always a catching up between the technology race and in terms of the responses by the regulatory framework. But auction is the right way forward, not only actually, Shukumar, in spectrum, but in natural resources and in terms of coal, in mines, and this is the way forward. This is not only because of the revenue consideration, but because on issues of transparency and the issues of what would be broadly acceptable as the best way forward. Having said this, you asked this very specific question on the right to privacy. Now, let me say that when the Aadhaar bill was first introduced in Parliament, it had a whole slew of kind of stuff which on the areas of privacy needed to be really refined and chiseled. Now, this Aadhaar bill, which has passed and secured parliamentary approval and which has been approved by the President and therefore notified as the new law, has very stringent provisions on privacy. In fact, on privacy, excepting for overriding security considerations. And what would be the overriding security considerations? The parameters of those considerations, the process of consultation and checks and balances on that have been exceedingly well built in the bill itself. And the focus of the new Aadhaar bill has moved away from mere biometric identification, which is unique, into a vehicle for financial transactions. That is why when the Speaker of the Lok Sabha saw this bill, she had no hesitation in certifying this as a money bill under the definition of the Constitution, and which is how this bill got enacted. Now, I can see some smiles on the face that did government indulge in a sleight of hand in getting this classified as a money bill to ensure its very smooth early passage in the upper house where the issue of the majority is an issue. Now, I don't think so, because the bill was changed to exclusively make this into a money bill and very stringent provisions on areas of privacy. Of course, where you're right is that some members have filed a public interest litigation in the Supreme Court questioning the classification of this Aadhaar bill as a money bill, and also question whether the provisions in regard to privacy are adequate enough it has been ring-fenced sufficiently, and has it really been made foolproof? I think that the reading of the bill will, Sukumar, assure you that the provisions on privacy have been quite stringently ring-fenced, and areas of abuses or misuses have really virtually been eliminated, making this only exclusive, this information, to be available for high security considerations following a procedure. So I, for one, Mr. Kumar, am quite satisfied that this will pass the test of the court, which has not yet disposed of that public interest litigation on the Aadhaar one, and view this primarily as a financial vehicle for administration of what digital platform really offers. And it's a centerpiece of the JAM story to be able to use this Aadhaar bill for purposes of administration of a whole slew of benefits, particularly on anti-poverty programs.
Thank you. I think Aadhaar is, like I said, it's a controversial issue. And I know this because our newspaper, while we don't take positions on the news side, on the editorial side, we always take positions. So from day one, we've supported Aadhaar for a variety of reasons. We think it's transformative in its powers. But I think there are still some questions about the potential for misuse and the ability of the bill to prevent that need to be addressed. And I think that's really where this whole litigative aspect could prove to be a hurdle. Chetan, your views, privacy regulations, net neutrality?
Extremely limited at this point, at least when it comes to Aadhaar, because we are, in the process like the world, waiting and watching. The vision seems great. The interplay between, Jandan, Aadhaar and mobile seems like an exciting proposition. But then, you need to see how all of this plays out on ground. And, we are keenly monitoring the landscape, is my diplomatic response.
Yeah, at a broader level, let's not look at Aadhaar, but privacy legislation itself is still in the works. Right. We don't have a privacy law.
Right.
And net neutrality, I'm sure you have a perspective on that, right? Which is, there must be some view that you have on that. So can you just share that with us?
Which is non-monopolistic, which is inclusive, which is no fast lanes, which is no paid prioritization, which is pro-consumer.
Yeah, I would almost say ditto to what Chetan said. All those perspectives are absolutely right. And as operators, we've always believed in innovators and them kind of doing the change that's required for larger good of society, consumers, and so on. I guess the only place we said is in the case of voice, because there is a talk about needing to build platforms on which rural India can be getting access, and therefore we've said when it comes to voice players, the need for same service, same rules. That's the only, should I say, broad statement that we made. Otherwise, fully support everything that Chetan talked about, equal access, no paid prioritization, pro-consumer, and everything else.
Okay. Parag, your views? Please say something controversial.
See, I will basically like to draw the attention to the basic crux of the debate, and then, rather than basically making statements which are known, right, I would like to draw the foundation of the debate basically is the fact that they feel, the other side of the camp feels that there is a possibility of influence that the operators can make on the traffic that flows from their network and to favor a few content providers and a few players. Now, this particular feeling comes from the fact that there isn't much competition in the marketplace as far as the operators are concerned. Because if you look at the number of players in the market, as far as the internet is concerned, there are already 5-6 operators there. There is always a possibility of any player, if they are misbehaving, the traffic going to the other player. Now, if everybody colludes, which means that the competition in the market is not there. So that is the fear. The biggest fear is that. Now, I would basically say that instead of having a blanket regulation on net neutrality and all the things that they have done, there could be intervention by TRAI, because TRAI has an authority of intervening traffic at any point of time, right? So why there has to be a blanket regulation? I would like to basically bring this point from the very beginning, why there has to be, because if there is a symptom of misuse, anybody can intervene at that particular point of time and regulate that particular behavior at that point itself. So this fear factor is a big problem, and that's why this net neutrality debate has gone to this level of intensity. I would say that today if you see internet traffic, right, that is the only piece which is of matter of concern. The other piece, which is the network managed piece, nobody is talking about that because that is the purview of the operator. So I just want to clarify this, it's a little technical. When I say network managed means there are services which flow in the network which are being prioritized by the operators. For example, voice services, they are prioritized by the operators. Like there are other services which are prioritized by the operators because there is a little bit of quality of service which is required, otherwise the service will lose relevance. There is a set of, there is another chunk of service which is flowing where there is no prioritization. Every traffic has to be treated separately. That piece is the debate where basically the debate is focused that, you know, if you basically give any kind of favoritism from the point of view of price or anything, that will lead to some kind of favors. Now, if you look at, I have investigated this matter, I have seen that the content providers on the other hand has got the full capability of discrimination where the TRAI's February 8 order has prevented the operators to discriminate. Operators cannot do differential pricing, but the content providers can. Now somebody may say that there are enough competition in the content provider space and therefore the discrimination should be allowed. But what if an operator makes an investment in the content provider space and has a tacit agreement, right? If there is a tacit agreement with the content providers and the content providers buys prepaid packs from the external market, and then gives it to the consumer, right, for a particular operator, only for a particular operator, because there are no regulation to bar it. So can you stop that behavior? TRAI doesn't have any jurisdiction to stop that behavior. So how long you can bar? That is the question you have to ask. How much regulatory capability that you have to control these kind of behaviors? That's where
Okay. I will throw it open to the audience in a bit and we can have questions, but before that I want to do a quick round on, because we are almost running out of time, and I would have liked to speak some more on net neutrality and privacy, but I know that we can speak for an hour and still get nowhere, right? I mean, we'll just go back and forth. Quickly, especially the tech people here or the people representing large corporations, large tech corporations, what are the kind of innovations you see in the tech space which can really boost adoption of mobile broadband? If there's something that you are doing, we'd like to hear about it. We do know, Chetan, about the Loon project, but I don't know how many people in this room do. The railway station effort that you're doing. So again, it'll be interesting if you can talk about that. We'll start with you.
Thanks a lot. You know, just a couple of things there. One, you know, the stage seems to be set for, you know, a broadband revolution, and we've been saying that for quite some time. But I genuinely feel that, you know, with device prices now on the downslide, you know, between 2012 and 2015, prices slid down by 40%, which I think is, you know, tremendous. When it comes to the few things that that we are doing to sort of energize and stimulate the space, one is the railway project, like you mentioned. So the endeavor here is to connect Wi-Fi enable 400 railway stations over a period of time. We have taken a goal of 100 railway stations by end of this year and provide and connect it with high definition streaming internet. And at this point in time, we've covered 20 across the length and breadth of the country. And the, you know, and it's, we have about 1.5 million people already, you know, online. And we're seeing some interesting models of data consumption emerge here. And in addition to that, we are also, we have a program called as Internet Sati. And like Balaji mentioned, The endeavor here is quite important. The idea is to fan out into rural India and bring as many women online as possible. So at this point in time, we've covered 9 states, and notably Assam, Tripura, West Bengal, and this is in partnership with, grassroots level organization, with Tata Trust, and the model that we follow is to train women, internet sathis as we call them, and every month we have about 500 internet sathis coming into our fold. And the goal in terms of numbers, in terms of clear-cut metrics, would be to try and ensure that the present 12% of women online goes up to about 30% in due course. And the idea is to cover 300,000 villages across the country. So that has been interesting, and this also feeds into the suggestion and the imperative that a few people here laid out on the need to ensure that digital skilling becomes a priority. In addition to this, when it comes to last mile connectivity, which is a constant challenge which the government has time and again publicized and amplified, the Google X team has what is known as what is it called? I forget. I'm sorry, the loon balloon. And essentially what we do there is you have special material balloon that is sent up, very simplistically put, and we tie up with the local carrier for LTE spectrum, and then transmit it to a ground station below, covering a finite radius. But again, this is extremely, we are in preliminary conversation with the government, and hopefully once the spectrum auctions are through, we should see some very concrete, tangible progress on that front.